I remember that era when every cartoonist was moving to New York City, and like,
That's over.
yeah, it's over. It's like everybody's going there, and everybody was. And in fact, you're part of this. Everybody was getting a book deal from a big book publisher.
Yeah,
That era when
yeah,
book publishers were like, cartoonists are going to save the publishing industry.
yeah. 2008, something like that, and they were like throwing. Everybody was getting like these big deals, easy peasy, because it was. I think what happened was that Watchmen was the movie came out, and Persepolis around the same time, and both of them sold like in the millions, and all the book publishers are kind of like, their eyes turn to dollar signs, and they're like, oh, this is, it's kind of like the, what do you call it, the gold rush, but it's all just like, we're just like fool's gold.
Yeah, but they didn't know how to do it. Like I love your book in the flesh, but the problem is that they printed like on cheap paper. The paper's so thin,
Yeah,
and it's like
yeah,
a comics publisher knows better than that. They think about
yeah,
it, and that's
totally, yeah.
so a lot
That
of those
that
books.
that still happens. That still happens. I have to like really lobby the big publishers. I'm like, use good paper. The last I had a book, 2015, about Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, and they sent me proofs of it. They like FedEx me like these proofs, and I was like, it was just like this half glossy paper, and the black was like really, you know, really bad. It was just like 70% black. And I was like, this is terrible. Can we go with another paper? And they're like, no, that's the paper. We already sent it to the printer. I was like, why did you send me proof? You know?
Uh,
So,
yeah, that's
but
a
this time, yeah, I've worked with the publisher again, and they've been a little more reasonable. But yeah, it's stuff. 80, 90% of people don't notice it, I think, but we do.
yeah. Well, that somebody was a publisher. First Second just sent me a copy of Stuck Rubber Baby, the
Mhm.
Howard Hughes book. It's like the anniversary edition of the book, but it's like it's printed on paper where it's like so thin you can see the page on the other side. I'm like,
Yeah,
how did you do this? Like this, you put all this effort into making this really important anniversary book, and you use the
yeah.
paper. Like why? Why do it?
It's they deal with a lot of books, and I think stuff falls, between they, I don't know, they have people handling it, and they handle, I don't know how many books they do a year now, but I think it's like 40 or something, so it's very easy for them to drop stuff,
Yeah.
drop
Uh,
the quality.
there's another friend of mine. I don't want to say his name because he gets pissed at me. But one time he worked for like a year despecking all of his artwork so it could be published in this book. Just sitting there going through each page and getting rid of little specks because he was all working from like photocopies.
Yeah,
And the book came out and they used like a paper stock that was like very grainy and had like specks in it and stuff. So it's like
yeah.
it's, that was,
I think the worst thing that ever happened to me was when I was in, I'm originally from Israel, and when I was a teenager, I was making comics there, and had a book out when I was 18 with the guy who was like my guru, and he wrote it and I drew it, and I hope no one ever sees it. But basically, I prepared the files a certain format, and then in the when they're preparing it for press, they're like, well, the book is about an inch taller, so they just stretched all my drawings by an inch, and
oh
I was just like, yeah, that's probably like the worst, thing that's ever. But that stuff is so embarrassing anyway that in retrospect, it's like I don't care. It's as if you were given the chance to be published before you deserve it. And then it's like, and then I'm so happy that it happened in this like other country, this little other country, and it's nowhere to be found. There's these two really embarrassing books, and that one actually, the concept was, it was like the superhero, the Israeli superhero, and he was just like this, kind of retired and just didn't want to just a lazy guy and didn't want to do anything. And it was kind of like this criticism of like Israeli culture or something. I don't, I shouldn't be talking about it.
I'm like conscious of like what books I buy because my partner Amy is just like, stop, stop bringing these books into like,
Hoarding books.
yeah. So like the large ones, like I got the Mad artist edition book. It's like giant.
Yeah.
And when it showed up, it came in like this enormous box because they had to ship it. And she was like, "What is
Yeah.
that? Furniture or something?" And I'm like sweating, like I don't want to show her what I just spent money on. It's like a $200 book. I'm just like, it's just this book I really need. I really need this book. And it's like enormous. I'm like, and it's like over the entire coffee table and stuff. I was like looking at it, it's like mix of like super ashamed of myself and embarrassed, and trying to like apologize to her, and also like really appreciating and loving looking at all this artwork.
Yeah, this real mishmash of emotions.
Yeah, because it's like I take up so much. That's the problem with those giant books, right? Because it's like they take up fucking space, man. It's like you don't.
Yeah. I kept, before we moved for a year, I would like gather these big bags of books and like take them to the Strand or donate them, and then my wife is still like, our apartment is full of your books and almost none of mine. And I'm like, I've given away so many. It's a bad habit. I mean, it's just, I don't buy records or anything, so I try not to. But yeah, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, should I start getting digital? Like there's that new Adrian Tomine book, and I'm like, should I get an actual copy or should I buy a digital one? Like it'd be a big leap for me to get a digital copy. Amazon has like something where you can get some comics for free because it's embarrassing to admit, but we have like the Amazon Prime thing, and they had I think it was Swamp Thing, and I was like, oh, I better read Swamp, like it's like kind of an important book, and it's just totally doesn't lend itself to digital because it has these like really elaborate frames, and then the frames are like this long, and I'm like, like zooming in and like, and it just doesn't. I still mostly read them physically. I teach at SVA, and they have a nice little library there, and they buy, because they have a cartooning department, they buy a lot of graphic novels. They buy basically like all the, they have your books. They buy, all the stuff that's coming out, and they have this bunch of shelves where they just display it, and the kids don't take anything out, and it's always like available. So I'm just like always just like, it was just like being spoon-fed whatever's coming out. So that was convenient. But now with the corona, it's like I can't really do that. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to pay money for books, for graphic novels. So
yeah, well, I don't want to. I mean, your book reads just fine on a e-reader or whatever they call them these days, on an iPad where I read it.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, I'm just too old fashioned, I think, about it. Like I like books as like the object, and I like to note the paper stock and all that stuff. I mean, I feel like the quality of everything goes down, except for books. Like I think the quality of books is actually going up, and I really appreciate them.
Yeah, I mean, and you've been to France, like you've seen like the stuff that the printing quality. And I remember I was there at a friend's house, and he had the Winchell's Pinocchio book. Have you ever read that?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing. Like I should buy a copy. And then I saw that I think Fantagraphics had a version of it in English. And usually they use pretty good stock and stuff, but I ordered it, and I was like, it was like reading a different book. The quality was like so much lower, and he used like a lot of textures and stuff, and a lot of it was kind of lost. And I don't know. I'm used to it now, where usually my books come out in a lot of cases in France first, so it's always going to be like downward slope from there. It's always like the best stock, the best printing, everything looks like a lot better. And then I get the American edition, and it's like, you know,
Well,
um,
the Italian editions are always thicker because they use really thick paper. So it's like
mhm.
really make a 100-page graphic novel seem like it's a 200-page book.
Yeah, I mean, in Europe too. I mean, they take these, they have these they call them albums, and it's like sometimes it's 65 pages, and they're like heavy, you know, like a hardcover, and you're like, wow, they really turned like this little wimpy comic into this like,
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's like 40 euros or something, and you're like, so expensive.
Yeah. Did you go to
Yeah.
Angoulême last year?
That's, I mean, not last year, but I think the one time I met you was actually in Angoulême.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
2016, I think 2016.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, yeah. Angoulême is like kind of like, it's definitely not my favorite convention, because it is really great to get the feedback, because you get people, a lot of people come in and they're like, I loved your comic, I love this scene, I love that, like, which is just, you know, for us it's just like catnip, because we just don't interact with people. And like once a year I would have people just actually, you know, give you some sort of feedback, which is nice. But it's just kind of like a little bit of a sweatshop where everybody, you know, asks you to do that. Like you have to do an actual drawing in each page, and you know, I signed like 100 something copies in 3 days, and it was just like I had to like labor over these drawings. And when I had Love Addict, when that came out, I had a bunch of like old French men come in with like really weird requests.
Oh,
Like this one old man, he's like, "Can you draw me a woman with a young flower?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean there?" And he's like, "It's for you to interpret." And I'm just like, ugh.
yeah, that's creepy.
Mostly old men that were buying that book. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Did your wife like that book?
hated it, hated it.
She did.
It's still being brought up. I'm never doing another bio comic. You know, the Joe Matt stuff where
Oh, God.
he, you know, his girlfriend finds the comics about him fantasizing about, you
Her
know, her friend. That is just like the most insane stuff. That, and of course, I mean, I don't, they're not that, you know, that's over probably.
But you know what? Every chat I've done so far, somebody's brought up Joe Matt. Like everybody loves Joe Matt, and they want to talk about Joe Matt.
I love him. Yeah, I discovered him a little late. I think my friend was like, I think he mentioned his some like page from Peep Show, like about being cheap. You know, that page about like, he was like, oh, my dad would, you know, he did this thing where he would like, I forget, like boil macaroni in like lukewarm water so he wouldn't like for a long time. And then you should read Joe Matt, like he has a whole page about being cheap. And I'm like, okay, I'll get, you know, and I got a used copy of it, and it just cracks me up. It's so funny and it's so painful, and you know, it's everything.
I've tried to get him on this channel so I can do a video with him, but he's just like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, and so I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna do
Yeah,
it.
eventually, you know.
Eventually he will, but it's funny like that because he hasn't published a book in over a decade. But
Mhm.
it's like literally every video I've done, at some point
People talk about him.
they bring
Yeah.
up Joe Matt, and it's just like
Yeah, with the Rod Serling book, it was really, I guess it's definitely more on the realistic side than compared to your stuff. But the part that was like a real doozy was the military part where he was like in the paratroopers
yeah,
and had to find like all these like airplanes, like, you know, from the 40s that they use in World War II, and exact like the parachutes and the way it's all like, it's crazy. There's so many ropes in like a paratrooper outfit. Um,
yeah.
anyway, that part was a
There's
lot. Like the guns are really hard. Like, you know, kind of hard to draw. Um, you know, tanks, all that kind of stuff is like I don't mind it, but it's a lot.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that stuff because there are people who are like military enthusiasts, you know, who.
Yeah, yeah. I joined like I think like a paratrooper Facebook group just to see if I can like if I run into trouble if I can ask them stuff. But then I noticed they're all like posting like Trump stuff, and then I was like, oh, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, but yeah, no, it's a lot of work. It's similar. This book is similar where I wrote it and I had to read a bunch of biographies of the person and um, uh, yeah, and I'm working with Mark Wade, who's the humanoids,
Oh yeah.
Rob Levine and Mark Wade, and which is cool because again, not mentioning Alex Ross when I was like a teenager, I was really, I think you were too, into like superhero comics, and I had drawn this giant mural of the Justice League descending in my bedroom when I was like 16,
Shit.
which has luckily been painted over now. But I liked Kingdom Come at the time. Um,
Well, you grew up in Israel, right? But were you
yeah.
in America?
What?
Were you born in America?
No, no. I was born there in Israel. I came here at 22. I don't have much of an accent because my mom's an English teacher.
Oh,
So,
and
but if you put me next to a dish of hummus, you'll have my accent come out. Um,
is your mom still there?
but yeah, my whole family's there. Yeah, it's a nice place. It's usually not now, but there's really good food there. There's cool people. Comics is problematic there just because it's so small and there's no people don't buy it. They're not really into it. So there's just not, if you want to make comics, it's not the best place. So that's one reason I left. Um,
How did you get comics there? Like, how would Kingdom Come have come to you?
um, Mile High Comics, remember
Oh,
that?
yeah, I'm from Denver.
Yeah, they
Oh,
would
yeah,
send
yeah.
stuff. Oh, okay. So yeah, so I got comics all the way from Denver, and I would order them. Also, the guy I mentioned at the beginning, who was like my, you know, teacher slash I worked for him, who we did that superhero comic together. He had an enormous collection of comics, so I would just kind of lend out stuff from him, and he mostly like kind of had the mainstream stuff, and I had another friend who had more of like the underground stuff. So from both of them, the other friend introduced me to like stuff like Crumb or I remember giving some Peter Cooper books and like all these things, like the Comics Journal, things like that he had. But before that, I was reading more mainstream stuff like you know Batman and um, I don't know, Grendel. Did you ever read Grendel? I remember kind of liking that one.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I only read it in the 90s. So I only know like, that's the only era I know, the whole Bane thing when they broke Batman's back and
This is the classic cover right here.
yeah, it's just like what's the name of that artist? I feel like they recently passed away, right?
Jones did this cover.
Okay.
I think Kelly Jones did all the covers for the Nightfall one, and then I don't know.
Okay.
The interiors are by uh, Jim Aparo.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like you've always kept like a distance from like the small press comic scene. Like you were never really like I when I first met you, it was in France, but like I'd never met you before because I didn't never saw you at like SPX or like any of the small press events that I would go to. Like do you?
I've been there. I don't go every year, but I've been there I don't know, like 4 times or something like that, but I'm definitely like not super, in the scene. If there is one. But I don't know. I like don't know how to categorize. I know, when I started doing my work, it was more like in the you could say that like Love Addict is kind of in the alternative, whatever you call it, like alternative comics. Is that what you even call it today?
Yeah, I guess so.
Independent comics, I don't know. And but yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm just like I don't. Yeah, I don't. I guess like I haven't socialized too much with like the cartooning.
Yeah.
Um, and when I do go to SPX, I feel like very like, oh, what's going on here? Like I feel a little like out of the. I also now I feel like old. I don't know if you go to SPX now and you feel like
I don't
kind of
go.
old. And were you in Columbus for a while, or you're just
Yeah,
taking like
I lived there for about 2 years.
okay?
Yeah.
And why'd you move to where you're now?
Well, I met my partner Amy. She worked for Caitlin McGurk at the Billy Ireland, the cartoon library there
Mhm.
in Columbus, and she had family here in South Carolina, but she also got a better job at the museum here. So
Okay.
so we just moved here together, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's a
It's
better.
probably a lot more. I mean, but Columbus is pretty affordable, right? That's the draw.
Yeah, yeah, but so is this. I mean, it's it's
Yeah.
it's
And
very.
the weather is probably better in South Carolina, right? Or slightly better.
It's way better. Columbus was depressing to live in because it was always gray. Like it's just
Yeah.
overcast all the time, and that really started to mess with our emotions, and it's
Yeah.
really cold, and we don't like that. So mhm.
Yeah, I mean, my wife uh, grew up part of the time in Buffalo, so I've been there a bunch of times, and I always go in the dead of winter, and I'm always like, I'm there only for a few days, and I get so depressed. It's just strip malls and snow, and
Yeah.
I don't know, and hot wings. At least they have the hot wings. I don't know.
Well, down here it's like all Southern culture, so you get like really good barbecue. You
Oh
know.
yeah. I had a project one time, like a really weird project where I had to go to Natchez, Mississippi, and I had to like interview people for like a comic about like health in the area because it was sponsored by some from Humana, which is like as a health insurer, and really weird project. But like I remember like flying there, and I was just so shocked by how different and kind of beautiful it was. But it's also like the race stuff is around everywhere. Like I remember going to an antique shop and they had these comics from the turn of the century, and they had like a little black baby, like kind of like as the hero, and it was like overtly like so crazy. Like I just seeing that, I was like, oh my god, there's this stuff, and you're also like you're selling this, and it's just again, I'm coming from Israel, like I don't this all this stuff to me is like really we deal with our own issue. We have our own issues there, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating. For a while, I would make these like short comics, and I would pitch them around. And I even did one recently about just like being a parent during Corona, where it's just like how is it like taking care of my kid, and it was like like a 6-page comic, and I pitched it to the New Yorker, and she was like, I forget what she said, but she didn't want to do it. And I was just like, it's the same thing. I worked on this, and this is so like, this is perfect for you guys and whatever. And then it ended up being in like this Jewish, magazine that everybody was like trying to, like I posted it and everybody was like, it looks good, but they asked for your email to read it. So I couldn't get through it. Like everybody that saw it was like, I couldn't read it because you had to they have a paywall or something. I'm like, oh, great. So,
Were you raised really religious or not?
no, not at all. My dad's from a kibbutz, which is like the least religious. It's like the opposite of Jerusalem, Hasids. It's like the very end opposite where they were like, you know, yeah, like I remember like being in a restaurant as a kid, and my dad was like, "What are you eating?" And he's like, "That's pork." And I'm like, wow, like, you know, because it's just like was really hard to get that
Mhm.
in Israel. So it's like that's the level of like like I'm not in like don't have like a smidgen of I still do Passover just because I think it's Passover and maybe Hanukkah because I think it's like nice. It's a nice like experience and you know, but yeah, I don't not big on the religion part.
Do you do Christmas or not?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm like my wife. She's not Christian, but she's you know she grew up celebrating Christmas, and she's like a lot more. She puts in a lot more effort into these things.
Mhm.
So naturally, like Christmas is like a lot more fun and like a lot more stuff happen and like there's food and things and then it's Hanukkah and it's my responsibility to do and I'm just like I light the menorah, you know, half the days and there's just like maybe I make some, you know, some single food dish that is related to Hanukkah, but it's like so I just like am so not good at it. So I feel like my son is just definitely going to be like, you know, Christmas is so much fun and Hanukkah is so lame because nothing ever happens, and you know, I'm already seeing it happening. But
You do presents on Hanukkah?
no, that's an American thing. In Israel, I mean, the whole 8 days, 8 presents. I think that you'd have presents sometimes, but it really wasn't a big thing. And you know, it's only in your consumerist culture that everything is about presents.
Yeah.
I mean, when you grew up,
Mormon.
you grew up Mormon, right? Do they read the Old Testament?
Yeah, just read the regular King James version of the Bible, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like backed up like the further adventures of Jesus are in the Book of Mormon. This is one of the pages I was working on today where he's courting his wife, and he's telling her the whole story about how this angel appeared to him in bed, and he went up this hill to dig
Yeah,
plates and stuff, and it's so it really tests your skills as a writer to be like, now how do I make this seem normal that she would actually she would agree to this, or that she would be like, oh, okay, that sounds reasonable. Like it's
yeah. I
but it,
mean, people were more gullible back then and like less
uh,
sophisticated about stuff, and you know, a lot more stuff was like up in the air. She couldn't use her iPhone to, you know, check on all these things. So
yeah, and it was all she grew up Methodist, so it's like she has this kind of magical like Christian worldview already. So like, and
yeah,
around
yeah,
that time period was like that's when everybody was saying they were seeing God and all this stuff in America, like
yeah,
big like a
yeah. She was
religious.
primed. She was primed for it,
Yeah,
probably.
so it's just like here's somebody who's saying that this angel appeared to them, and he's saying an angel appeared to him who showed him these plates, this book, and the whole book was where the Native Americans came from, where the Indians came from, because at the time it was a big debate, like who are these people? How do they get here? Like they didn't know. So there were all these theories bouncing around, and the theory
Yeah,
that went off was that they were from Jerusalem. So like that,
yeah.
and this angel told him that there's this book written that explains where they came from. It didn't really have anything
That's
to
so
do
weird.
with
Yeah,
God until this influence came into it. So I think that it became a religion, and it just kind of kept building on itself like that,
yeah.
like throughout. And you'll see that in this graphic novel. It's like every chapter it just gets bigger, and the more persecution they get, the more the people that are involved in it double down because they think like they're early Christians just being persecuted, so they're
Yeah.
relating to this thing, and so their faith is getting stronger. It's really interesting, and they're holding him up as this great prophet, but he's just a man who's all of a sudden getting a lot of power, and like that just corrupts a man. He starts marrying all the
It's
women and stuff. It's
it,
it's
it's kind of interesting how that's like kind of. I almost feel like humans are not meant to. They're not built to have like a certain level of fame and success, and I think that like very few people are like able to like handle it properly, or like a lot of people just fail. You know, you see all these people like Prince and like Michael Jackson. It's just like, oh, like so successful, and then it's just like you're not, you know, built for that, and it's like something universal. So you see it like all the way going back to like, like the Greek, the Roman emperors, and like, like just people like rising to the top and then like being corrupted, and it's just, it never gets old. It's like so interesting.
Well, men are only as like evil as they think they can get away with. I mean, for the most part. I mean, if people are wearing masks, it's like they. What was it? Somebody was just talking about this. Like, actually, on that comedian, the Dana Gould. He has like
Yeah.
a podcast called the Dana Gould Hour, and on the episode, he was talking to this guy who was talking about how when he goes to comic conventions, there'll be somebody who's like dressed, like in a Deadpool costume, and just being that anonymity makes them feel like they can get away with sexually harassing women at the convention because they think they can get away with it and they're not going to be caught. That's where people's morals.
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of, the problem really, that you have the power to get away with those things ends up, giving you the freedom to do these things. And yeah, so that's definitely part of the problem.
Yeah. Somebody who handled becoming famous pretty well, I think, was Neil Gaiman. I think I don't know.
Yeah, he seems like such a nice guy. Yeah, everybody says, Josh, I think, has met him, and everybody say that he seems like a nice guy. And my wife that works in TV, she says that in general, a lot of the people that you see keep appearing in like movies and like keep getting work, they are like the nice ones. They're the ones that are like easier to deal with, and like not the prima donnas. And
Yeah.
like we saw this awful movie a few months ago. We saw The Island of Dr. Moreau with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando. Have you ever seen that?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's so funny. And then we saw a documentary about it, about the guy who directed it, who was like totally crazy. And they were talking about Val Kilmer and how he was just like complete like asshole. He was just like so awful to everybody. And then we're like, Val Kilmer, like we haven't, he hasn't been in a movie in like 15 years or whatever. Just that's why, like he gets a reputation. So that's a little comforting to know that, like, you don't really, it's not always really like that. You get successful, and if you're awful, if you're an awful person, it's not going to last then necessarily. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah,
and
but everybody slips up sometimes. Sometimes it takes something to learn not to be an asshole, and everybody fucks up.
Yeah, I have one friend, Steve Brodner, who's was a teacher of mine at SVA, who's like one of the most successful political illustrators. He actually had a book with Fantagraphics like 10 years ago, I think. And he's like super successful, like did things for the New Yorker, covers for like many, many magazines. And he's like the nicest guy. And you're like, this is the model. Like, this is like a guy you want to imitate, who's like both really nice and generous and successful, and not, being an asshole about it. So that's always like comforting to know that, to see that exists. So,
yeah, Charles Burns is similar too. Charles Burns is like a really nice guy. Why do male cartoonists like? Why do we do this? Like, why do we draw ourselves in this way? Like, why do we like making ourselves look just awful? I don't know, man.
I think it's you take joy in like beating. There's we have this like, there's joy in like beating yourself up a little bit, and like you don't want to. I mean, I think you want to. The lamest thing you could do is like draw yourself as like this awesome guy. That's like the worst thing you could absolutely do. So it's a lot classier to, we didn't start it, like there's that
it's
been going around. And
yeah, it's a tradition.
Like, and your stuff, I think Josh said, he was like, oh, you're like the most Jewish non-Jewish guy I know, because it's like self-deprecating and like, making fun. You're neurotic, kind of like you said, like, oh
Me?
no, he's so neurotic. He's so neurotic.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I actually really like that stuff. Like, I just read that review on the Comics Journal of Adrian's new book. As the world is burning, do you really think we need a book like this? And I was like, fuck this. I still have books I want to write that are like this. Like, I love this shit, and like a lot of people do love this shit. Maybe it's just not for you, you know?
You need a distraction. I
That's
don't want
how
to
I
like.
feel.
I don't want to like read about. I already read about the world burning every day,
Yeah.
and I feel bad every day when I'm like, my son gets a box and it's all made out of plastic, and I'm just like, no, I want like a little break from that, stuff. So yeah, not everything's for everybody, and I think that's the problem right now with dialogue in general, that like everybody has to like have this agreement, consensus of what's okay.
Yeah.
And if you don't fall into that, this like kind of mild zone, then there's no room for you. But no, there's something for everybody. And
Yeah.
I think, I think I'm probably not there. I'm always tempted at doing like another bio comic, maybe about like, or like semi-auto bio comic about like being a teenager. Cause I feel like I have a lot of, interesting memories and stuff that I could kind of harvest into a comic.
Well, I mean, during quarantine, I drew an autobio comic and then like self-published it, and then just sold it to people on Facebook and everything. And it was great. Like, it's just like the people that are friends with me on here might be interested in this, and I'm not going to try and like distribute it or whatever, you know. But like
Yeah,
I mean, I'm still like that, and working on that was a good help to me mentally to get away
yeah,
from, because it was fucking stressful, man. I mean, people are still talking about it, but it's like I felt like the comic industry itself is completely collapsing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely. I mean, I don't know how it's doing now, but it really felt like Armageddon. Felt like really bad. But I mean, you still seem to have projects going on, and I still have books that I'm working on, and I think people in other industries like really got hurt a lot more. So I think we're like pretty lucky. I have a friend who's like a wedding photographer, and he lost all his work for the year. Like,
Oh God.
had to move in with the in-laws, and like terrible. Yeah. Well, good luck on your project. I can't wait to read it.
Thanks, man. You too. Thanks for giving me your time.
Bye.
Yeah.